It's Friday, November 29th, 2024. Promotional segment where I tell you that you can go to the recently updated supportourshow.com site where I now have Lando's button has been enhanced.
Ooh,
it looks the same, but if you click it, well, yeah, because before it just went to your Amazon author page. Now it goes to the link tree that has all the living links, as Linktree likes to refer to them. Yeah, well, because you can update them and nobody has to update an address. That's what makes a link tree good. Until, of course, they suddenly charge for everything and we have to abandon that for whatever comes next. So there is that. No, really. I mean, it's a freemium model.
I wasn't laughing because it wasn't funny.
Yeah. No, you laugh because it's sad but true. But actually, because they do have premium features, they probably could leave it free for the foreseeable future until they're acquired by somebody or whatever happens.
Or they get bought.
Anyway, yes. Yeah. If you want to support our show, you can go to supportourshow.com.
Did you see that thing somebody was writing about? It's not unheard of the idea that somebody would buy was it Blue Sky?
Yeah, they could.
Just to shut it down because it's a competitor?
Well, they can't really shut it down because it's decentralized.
Exactly, but it's the idea that for corporations, when they have competition, it almost behooves them to buy their competition and destroy it.
Well, as far as I'm aware, Blue Sky is not public, therefore they can't be forced to sell.
Yeah.
So as long as the people involved, which I think it's not a huge team. I think it's like 6 people running the whole thing. Let's see. Blue Sky, I believe, is still private. As long as it's private, they can't be forced to do anything. So as long as they finish their federation, which they're saying they're working on, and I believe them, it's just going to take them a while. Once they get the federation in place, then nobody will buy it because it will be pointless. Because once you can federate, that means you could just move all your stuff to some other service. So if somebody were to buy it, they could just start up another company and you would just move everything there in a way that doesn't require Blue Sky to be involved at all. So that's the nice part about it. Let's see. Is it publicly owned? Decentralized? Yeah, I know that part. Primarily operate an American benefit corporation. What is that? In business and only in the United States corporate law. Benefit corporation is a type of for-profit corporate entity whose goals include making a positive impact on society. Wow, they have a name for this thing?
A non-evil corporation?
Well, yeah, I mean, they all start off that way. Interesting, yeah. Wow. Well, it's true. I mean, yeah, I believe they are still privately owned.
Jeez, do you still keep do you still use USB keys?
You mean flash drives?
Yeah, little flash drives.
Oh, of course. I use them all the time. I have a ton of them.
But do you keep the older ones? I have like a drawer.
Oh no. No. If it's too small to use, I drill it and I throw it out. I mean, I'll throw it out. I put it into the e-waste or whatever. Oh yeah, no. Of course,
I recently moved my office around and I had this drawer that I had I use. It has old keys in it. I have them right here next to the desk. And I was just looking at one casually while you were talking about the evil, non-evil corporations. And I was like, holy shit, that's only 64 megabytes. Like, what the hell is it? Oh, sorry, 64 gigabytes. It was 64 gigabytes. And I was looking at it going, I don't think I have use for that at this point. But I got to look through all these because, like you said, you got to drill them or something,
Yes. I mean, it's a lot easier with a flash drive. Actually, I'll tell you what the best thing to do is, because you don't really have to drill a flash drive unless it's one of those titanium sealed ones, which I only have had one of those because honestly I've never found the real value in them, but I tried one out. Is all you got to do is break it open, and then you'll see inside there's just a little board. You just take a pair of what do you call it, like wire cutters or something. You just break it into 3 pieces. It's not going to function.
I should just blow them up. I think it'd be more fun.
Yeah, it's toxic though. You know, that's bad.
I'll wear a mask.
That's not good for the air.
Well, nothing's good for the air. Farting isn't good for the air at this point.
No, I know it's not. But what I'm saying is, if you just cut it into 3 pieces and then e-waste it, it'll be fine. Nobody else can be able to use it.
E-waste it. I love all
No,
these
what you
little
really have to
terms.
drill are hard drives. That's what you have to drill.
How about,
And that
can
makes
you, so dunking them doesn't help, does it? Like wiping them and dunking them?
No, Dunky doesn't do anything.
Really?
No. No. Okay.
Even if you let the whole thing catch fire?
All right. Well, all right. If you catch fire, I thought you meant dunking it.
Yeah, so
Water.
the last
fire?
laptop that I switched off of, I put into a bucket of water, right? Until it started to smoke and fizz, and then I pulled it out and left it in my driveway.
No, that doesn't.
Hold on.
That doesn't do anything.
I'm not done with my story.
It doesn't.
And then
matter.
I
Go ahead.
watched it catch fire,
Yeah.
and the whole
doesn't matter.
thing basically burned for like 2 days.
Unless you look at the hard drive, meaning you take it apart and verify that it has actually burned through, it is recoverable.
Interesting. Even I don't have anything that I don't have anything that anybody wants to recover that badly.
There's 3
My
ways.
porn collection is not that amazing.
There's 4 ways to kill a drive, but really 3 are the for sure ways.
Jesus,
One
this sounds
is
like a Disney song coming on.
No, it's great. Yeah. I try to kill my hard drive. I just got to get the Johnny
There's
Cash
only
kind of
4
backing
ways
beat.
to kill a hard drive.
I want to kill my hard drive.
Yep,
I
go
drilled
on.
it through and through, and then I took it out and I rubbed it in dog poop. Yeah. So what you do is
that's a Johnny Cash song. I think I've heard that.
that's
one.
what I said.
Go
The
on.
Johnny Cash backing. That's what I was
Yeah.
going to. That's exactly what I was going for. So what you would do is you can do a series of writing ones and zeros to the drive where you overwrite it. But the true paranoias will tell you that that's not enough. So the idea is, you know how a hard drive works generally, right? That you're not actually filling it up ever.
I know how the disk works. I don't know how the flash technology works. I'll
So
admit that.
when you, I don't want to go completely into the weeds on this, but because some people won't care. But essentially, when you delete something off a drive, you don't actually delete anything. What you're doing is you're telling the drive and therefore the computer, all right, this segment of space on the drive can be overwritten with a different data type, whatever. So you delete a photo off your hard drive, you're not really deleting anything. You can overwrite it, but overwriting it only once or even a few times isn't really overwriting it. It can still be recovered with the right tools. They'll still be able to parse through it, almost like a transparency. This is very, very broadly surface level, so anybody who has true understanding knows that I'm making this very easy to understand, but it's far more intricate. So overwriting it, even though there are ones that say, okay, this is overwriting it like the CIA does. Yeah, no, it isn't. That's
I
a
remember,
lie.
you remember the delete program that overwrit it like 32 times or something like that?
Exactly. Yes.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. I'm telling you right now, the CIA is not just overwriting their drives. They are incinerating them with thermite. That's the real way, is you thermite the drive so that there is nothing left but basically dust and shavings.
so I should blow up the USB keys, see?
Or what you do is you drill. The USB keys are different, though, because it's a small
little.
piece of flash memory.
Yeah.
They're very easy to break. But a bigger drive, you have to drill holes into it, especially with platters, but even with the flash drives, because that stops any possibility of repair. They would have to try to... I mean, you should drill probably 5 to 8 holes into it in random spots. And that would make it virtually impossible for any... And if you're being targeted by a state or something, well, they're going to kill you. So
and
whatever.
the thing to come back to here is that I don't have anything that anybody wants.
Right. So that's
so it's,
the way I covered.
you know,
I covered
it's
overwriting, thermite, drilling. And then the other way, which I don't know any scenario where a normal person would ever do this, but if you were to submerge it in salt water for like a month, then it will corrode everything inside of it and it will be unusable. Because you will have basically oxidized everything to pieces.
Does salt water settle? I don't know if I went to like the ocean, right, and I brought back a bucket of water, a bucket of salt water.
I don't think. I mean, the Dead Sea has been the Dead Sea forever, so I don't think.
That's what I'm saying. Does salt water eventually settle? Does the salt settle
so.
in the water,
No.
or will it stay potently acidic that whole time.
Oh, well, I guess I can. Look at that.
It's a weird. It's kind of, I never really.
I'm gonna say no. I'm gonna say no. Why does salt in the oceans not sink to the bottom? Well, this is what you're talking about. When dissolved in water, salt breaks up into sodium and chlorine ions, which combine with molecules so they cannot easily sink. However, there is a tendency of streams of fresh water. Okay, so they're saying the only way it happens is if fresh water is introduced. So if you were to take a bucket of the Dead Sea and bring it home, no, it would stay like that unless you introduced, I guess eventually.
I love how you had to go all the way to the Dead Sea.
Well, isn't that the saltiest ocean in the world?
It is.
But
it's just funny that you had to go all the way there. That's all.
Yeah, well, no. Listen, if you're going to do it, then do it right.
Well do it right, yeah.
Yeah, so that's what I'm saying. So unless you were going to, let's put it this way. If I was so paranoid that I was going to resort to that for some reason, then I would go to the Dead Sea. But yes, in theory, if you found any salt water body that had you want it to have the highest salt content you can have, right? Because you want it to destroy it. I don't know how long you'd have to let it sit in just typical salt water, but it's probably going to be a long time. So I think that Dead Sea water would work the fastest.
Hold on. I actually might have an alternate option.
Ooh, good.
What is it called?
So realistically, everybody, it's the most common way is just drill it.
Yeah, but
that would be my advice.
There's a chemical that you use to to prepare fabrics for tie-dye. And it's a type of sodium.
Well, okay, so I should.
And if you put that in water, it's very acidic. I've seen that.
So I was going to say, and the other way would be if you want to start messing around with acids, right?
Yeah.
But I don't know that the danger level of that compared to all the other. I mean, don't get me wrong, thermite you don't really want to be messing with either. So that's why I'm saying for most people, just getting a drill is probably the easiest and safest route. You know?
Yeah.
So if you were asking me, if somebody came to me and said, what is the best way to make sure nobody can use anything from this, I would say get a drill and drill it 8 times in random places. And then just dispose of it.
Yeah. The reality being, like I said, nobody gives a shit what's on my shit.
Now, with your burning laptop, could it have destroyed it? Yes, but there's a certainty percentage that, you have to be comfortable with.
I don't know. It was a pretty impressive fire.
No, but if you didn't take because you can think that something is burning, but if because don't forget, a hard drive is encased, and there's several layers of metal around it, so it could be warped. But you can recover a warped drive, right? Because I'm assuming this was, you can. It just depends, and solder points can be resoldered, so it just depends.
Yeah, it
if
depends.
You didn't visually inspect it. Yeah.
What it really depends on is the desire of whatever parties want the data.
That's what I'm saying. So,
but if nobody wants your data, then really it doesn't matter.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. That's all. So,
but otherwise,
Dead Sea, by the way, 10 times as salty as the ocean. So that's the way, baby.
Yeah.
That's the way.
They were telling me about what happened to my dad when he went swimming in the Dead Sea. So my father when he was older, he had a what do you call it? He couldn't have salt in his diet because it made him retain water. And what's that? Yeah.
No, I know what the Dead Sea's known for, so I see where this is going.
And he went swimming in the Dead Sea for a while. And when I think he left like a day later and he came back to the States. When he came back to the States, his legs and his whole body got real swollen with fluid and stuff like that. Man, yeah. And I remember the doctor asking him, have you been eating a lot of salt? And my father being like, No, I've been. And then finally somebody was like, I wonder if this is because he went swimming in the Dead Sea. And the doctor was like, yep, that'll do it. Because just the amount of salt that you absorb through that. So
if you're in there long enough, I'm sure,
Yeah. Isn't the Salton Sea pretty fucking salty too? That's more by you. What's left of it anyway?
I was gonna say
what's left of it.
Let's see. Is a shallow, landlocked, highly saline, and oh my God, what word is this? And Endoric? A terminal lake. Ooh, that's a terminal lake.
It does sound like an interesting story, doesn't it?
My God, this Wikipedia page is full of great words. Endoric Lake, a sink lake, terminal lake, an endoric basin.
It's man-made, isn't it?
No, it doesn't say man-made. So
pretty sure the salt
so
and sea was-
salinated is a high concentration of dissolved salt. So I think that's different. Let me see. Salton Sea is a shallow, high. Was it man-made? Lake is a Where's the history? Oh, history. The Gulf of California.
Yes, it was man-made. It was created in
Okay, I was
1905.
gonna say. All right.
1905. 1905.
1905. Yeah. That's 19. That is currently the working show title. 1905. That's great. Actually, I'll do it with the digits and then the word Flive. That'll really throw people. 1905. Oh wait, should I do 1905 LIVE or FLIVE?
If you don't think something better is gonna come up in the next 2 hours.
Oh, you know what? You never know. I like. That's Filv. Flive. Wait, Jesus, spelling is tough. There we go. Got it.
Especially spelling
when
wrong.
when it's a non-existent word. Yes. Okay. Yeah. Wow. Huh. Interesting.
So anyway, your data, most people don't want it anyway, so
yeah.
it works out that way.
Right.
Um,
So like I said, for the common person, I would advise a drill. It's just going to be the easiest, and you already probably have a drill. The only thing you might need is a metal piercing bit. So
yeah,
I
gotta go through my old keys anyway and just figure out what the hell's on these things.
Well, like I said, I have a wire stripper that has this kind of ridged, clamp end to it. And I literally just take that thing and I clamp on it, and you just see the thing explode into pieces. And I do it inside a bag. I tie the bag up, and I e-waste it. That's it. It's easy.
There you go. 1, 2, 3.
Not that I have really ever stored anything that I really worry about on a flash drive. Flash drive is usually for media stuff. And so I guess if somebody really wanted to hear one side of our conversation without the correction in place, you got it. You know what I mean? You win, I suppose.
Well, that's exactly what I said. Is that there's nobody wants the data in the first place, so you're fine.
Yeah. Not in the stuff I usually store. No.
Yeah.
No.
So
That's pretty much
I finished rereading Count Zero,
yeah.
which I know you did. So Count Zero is the
Pretty
second
recently,
book in the Neuromancer trilogy.
Yes.
And Joe, I know you had reread it not that long ago.
Within the last 3 months.
So I just finished rereading the rereading it about maybe 4 hours ago.
Mm-hmm.
And I gotta say, it's different. It's different than I remembered it. I remember Neuromancer so well because I've done the audiobook for that so many times that I've got I could sit down and tell you the entire story of Neuromancer. Maybe not scene for scene, but I could tell you the whole thing. Hitting the chapters, right? But with Count Zero, I don't think I've read Count Zero more than twice. And when you said you were rereading them, I was like, you know what? I was like, I should revisit this because a lot of this stuff is core literature from me. If somebody was teaching a class on the psychology of me, and there was core literature that had to be read, a lot of these cyberpunk books would be core literature. Have you ever thought about yourself that way as a college course?
What I would make as a college course that would be
No. If you were being taught as a college course, what do you think the material would look like?
Oh, yeah, I've never thought of it.
It's an interesting psychological sort of statement on self. When you really need to think about yourself and what's important and what other people think is important about you. It's just a fun thought experiment. But I had thought about it before, and I was like, yeah, it's cyberpunk is core literature for me. And kind of a certain collection of books. And the thing is Count Zero, even though I've only read it twice, because I read it when I read it, it is core literature because it did affect me quite a bit when I read it when I was younger. And what's funny is that it started out really weak for me. Did you get that?
The book, you mean the Count Zero start off as a weak book?
Yeah, so when I reread it, it started out very weak to me, and I was like,
but,
you know what? I don't know if this is as good
it
as
would have to. Well, this is the thing, though. This is the only. Well, not the only. This is a persistent problem when you have something like Neuromancer that came first, right? Neuromancer has what, a dozen gigantic, fantastic conceptual ideas in it. I mean, the whole structure of the world that he constructs in Neuromancer is so visually and intellectually interesting because it's so fleshed out. It's so well explained, and it's so what's the word for it? Almost instinctually designed, where you understand it. That to follow that with anything less than that scale is going to feel weak up front.
You say that, and I know plenty of people who tried to read Neuromancer and felt that it wasn't explained enough and that it was too vague to them. I think that the problem is that we are... What is it? What's that phrase? Is only visible to the initiated. We are initiated. What's that line from?
Of course. That I don't know where. I remember the line.
But you know what I'm
I think
talking,
it's
right?
slightly different, but I know what you mean. But
yeah.
Yes, okay. Normal variances aside, what I'm saying is... If you read the book, and you get its wavelength, which some people won't, no fault of their own. It's just the way it is. It's just how it is. I don't like Lord of the Rings, and people think I'm nuts because I can't make it into that book.
Hey, listen, you're in the right crowd. I mean, I like the movies Lord of the Rings, but Tolkien fucking puts me to sleep.
But there are people who will say that, and I'm not saying they're wrong. I've seen excerpts that absolutely demonstrate this. Excerpt form that it is.
Tolkien was a genius, but if I have to read fantasy, I will pick up Dragonlance before I pick up Tolkien.
It is magnificently constructed for those who find its wavelength. That's what Neuromancer is. But if you are of that type, there are so many big, interesting ideas in there that Count Zero is so much further down to ground level.
See,
for
it is and it isn't. Time. What I was going to say was, in the beginning, I was a little bored with it. I was reading it, and look, it's not that it's good. It's just it's not as good as Neuromancer. So when I started it, I was a little bored with it. I was kind of like, where's this going? And then about 25% of the way in, it really took off for me, and I finished it. And now I finished, and I said, shit, that was really, really good, and that was as good as it was in the end as it was when I first read it. And I think that he takes more time. Like, you're not wowed by the world as much because you know the world, right? And these are other characters, and I would argue the fact that some of these characters are less fascinating because they're not like what's his name? It's not Carter. Jesus Christ, what's it? Turner.
Yeah.
Turner is not
a weak character.
Yeah, well, Turner is not as fascinating as Molly, as far as like a street samurai merc goes, right? He is definitely more of an archetypal, like, lone cowboy type character, right? Or even a Ronin samurai looking for someone to be loyal to. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. What's fascinating about his story is the way he interacts with the world rather than how he himself is. His interactions are fascinating, right? And he remains the archetype through the whole book because he comes into the story and he leaves. You know, he doesn't stay with was it Angie? He doesn't stay with her.
Mary, isn't it Mary? Oh no, you're right. No, Angie, you're right.
She becomes Mona Lisa.
Yeah. Mona Lisa
but yeah, so he leaves her behind in the end because he doesn't think that she'd be good with him, and he ends up going back to his brother's. I don't know. They were married. His brother's. Was it his ex-wife or his girlfriend?
No, they're married, even though she cheats on him or something. Yeah.
Yeah. So he goes back to her.
But they're certainly together.
Yeah, he goes back to her, and he basically. He just wants a normal life. Like, he's fucking tired of this world that he's in, and it's kind of the opposite of Case. Like, even if you compare him to like the Case wants into this world and he wants to stay into this world. And same as Molly. Molly has done everything she can to be a street samurai, and she wants to stay street samurai, right? And her problem is she wants connections within that world, but the men that she's connected to are essentially damaged and often marked for death, right? So Turner himself, it's not him that's fascinating, it's his interactions. And honestly, all the stuff with Turner gets really great when he finally when all the pieces kind of fall into place and he hooks up with Count Zero and everybody. he's interesting because you realize that he is this sort of blank, though he seems blank inside to everybody else, he is this scary figure. You know, so like Turner is most fascinating through the eyes of other characters in the story.
Right.
Which and what I like is, and that's different. He didn't just make another Molly. In the same way that with Count Zero, he didn't just make another case. He made
not at all.
a
The opposite.
young, he made a young, hopeful, green hacker who wants to get into the world.
Exceptionally naive person.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And he did a good job of that because he really is at the bottom, and it isn't through it's this twist of fate that he suddenly gets thrust into the big leagues.
Right.
But also, what's fascinating to me is the way that the effects of Neuromancer have translated to the world, so that the AIs have split, and the AIs have basically turned themselves into like internet gods, because that's how they're perceived.
Yeah.
What's that?
The one in Count Zero, they're voodoo gods, basically.
Yes, but that's because that's how
Voodoo,
they're
whatever.
perceived.
Yeah,
They've become
I know, but
that because that was the avenue. You know, and what's fascinating is I wouldn't be surprised if in other parts of the world they are not voodoo gods; they are something else.
Well, I think I think in Mona Lisa Overdrive they allude to that they're a different god set to somebody else. I thought there was some kind of secondary mention of that.
But I love that. I love that this kind of the mysticism comes in, where they treat them like they're gods because they, it's the whole any technology significant advanced enough would come off like magic. They come off like magic. So I love that aspect of it. I love that is the after effect, and also the fact that you have parallel storylines that are intermingled and yet never really meet. So the art dealer, she never hooks up with Turner and Count Zero. Count Zero eventually meets up with the guy who's kind of hired the art dealer, but only so that the AIs can destroy him. Otherwise, they never meet. They never have anything to do with each other, even though their story is intrinsically linked. And I love that. Like, you don't often get that. It wouldn't have worked if all three characters never met. I like the fact that Turner and Count Zero end up in the same place at the same time. But the art dealer, it's neat the fact that the Count Zero character only remotely comes into contact with her world. So there's a lot of that. And the thing is, because I've now read so much of Gibson, these are the beginning of some of Gibson's archetypes. Like Gibson loves the ludicrously wealthy financial backer. Right? So in the Pattern Rec books, it's what was his name? Big Booty? Is that his name? The Tom Cruise,
something like that, but it's not that.
It's the Tom Cruise lookalike with too many teeth.
Yeah, whatever.
I remember that. That description of him. But he loves his fantastically wealthy benefactors who may or may not be evil. What's fascinating is that early on, they tend to have a negative element to them, whereas later on, they tend to. What he changes is the idea of, well, what if they weren't evil? So in the Pattern Rec books, I can't remember his name, so I'm just going to go Big Booty. Big Booty is not evil per se, So like I like that, but yes, you begin to have these archetypes, and like Turner, for example. So there's a lot of DNA between Turner and the lead guy in Virtual Light, but the character in Virtual Light is a more evolved version of Turner, I think, personality-wise.
Well, and that's exactly what I felt like he was doing, was he realized that Turner wasn't quite what he wanted him to be, and then he went full bore with, what is the guy's name? Carver? No.
It might be Carver, yeah.
Something
It's
like
funny
that.
how there's a lot of his character names. You remember the characters, but you forget the names because they're very sort of everyday kind of names. You know what I mean?
Well, and there's a lot of similarity. Not that they're copying, but there's a lot of similarity. They kind of bleed into each other to a degree.
Well, yeah, because he has his archetypes.
Unless it's something like Molly, who he never did another one like Molly. Molly that's it.
No, I haven't.
He knew he hit that one so well, he just kept using her instead of trying to do a revision of her, which is
Well,
what
the
I
thing is,
feel like
he
the guy
only
in the
really
third book
he
is
only
somewhat.
reused her once. I mean, that is his style, which is that Molly shows up in the beginning of the Neuromancer trilogy, and she shows up towards the end of the Neuromancer trilogy, and that's always what he does. Because in Pattern Wreck, the main character from Pattern Wreck shows up in the third book. She is the designer that they're looking for. You know, and she only shows up at the end of the book. That is Gibson's style, and it is funny that once you figure out Gibson's tricks, right, you start to expect things. But the funny part is that you'll be reading the book, and even though you kind of know, you have an idea of what might be coming, you're still surprised and elated when you see it happen. So it's not like you're sitting there going, I know what's going to happen now. It's like you are vaguely aware, but the way that it evolves feels so kind of surprisingly organic.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I found that, like I said, the first 25%, I think it was because it was in the Neuromancer world, but it wasn't Neuromancer. It's kind of weird to go back to. But then after that, once I kind of settled into it, it's great. It's fantastic. I still enjoy the fuck out of it after that. And I love, like I said, I love the voodoo AIs, and I love this idea of the big MacGuffin is the biochips, right? Is the technology that links the organic and the inorganic, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And yeah, it's just it's got all those things. What's that?
Yeah, Molly's in all three books. That's what I thought. She's in all three books, and then she's in the.
She's not.
Yeah, she is. She's in the Mona Lisa Overdrive. She's in.
Where is she in Count Zero?
Isn't she?
She never shows up in Count Zero.
Oh, yeah. I don't think she shows up physically, but he uses her all over the place. And then she's in the Giant Mnemonic story.
Yes. She shows. Yeah, because that was.
What I mean is,
he
never created an analog to her. You know what I mean?
No,
he
there's
realized that character was so good. That's one of those where it's like, nope, don't even try it. You cannot.
Yeah, because I think a lot of people when it first came out, when Count Zero first came out, a lot of people thought that he was using the old, you've got your Street Samurai and your whole hacker combo again, and it's like no, because Count Zero is nothing like Case, and Turner is not. He's not Molly. He's not that kind of Street Samurai. And like I said, they never meet really until the very end.
Yeah, and Rydell is the guy in the...
Rydell, that's what it was, Rydell.
But that's what I mean is, so Turner wasn't quite tuned correctly, so Rydell became... At least this is my interpretation, is I'm like, Rydell is the better version of Turner.
Well, because I think that Turner is a secondary character. I think that the main crux of Count Zero is Count Zero and the art dealer, whose name I can't remember now.
I can't remember either.
And whereas in the Bridge trilogy, Rydell and is it YT? No, YT is Snow Crash.
No, that's Snow Crash. It's
I always mix up the two of them.
Chevette.
Yes, Chevette. Yeah, it's Chevette and Rydell. Those are the two stories that are that have to link up.
Incidentally, it always annoys me that he uses flechettes a lot in his books with characters named Chevette, so I can't remember which is fucking which. So, note to authors: don't use stuff that sounds similar with character names and weapons, please.
He loves his flechette guns. Yeah.
Oh my God, he does. But when you read it, it's got the same last 5 letters as a character name. So I'm like, wait, is she being thrown like Wolverine being thrown by? Oh no, it's a gun. Okay, got it. All right, never mind.
I would love a gun that shot Chevette.
Because he also uses that description. It's a weapon that throws flechettes or whatever. So it's like, oh, don't use that term. Say it shoots them. Just say it shoots needles.
It's
or
a
something.
Chevette shooter. I've got a Chevette shooter here.
Yeah.
So I, having reread it, like I said, it started out slow, but then it just took off and it was great. And I love the expansion of the world and how the world has evolved. It's still not a world I'd want to live in. And it's
none
interesting.
Of the sprawl worlds are worlds you'd really want to live in unless you were exceptionally rich.
Yes, yeah. But it's interesting the way I wasn't a skillful enough reader to fully feel the way that the world evolved when I read it first. Whereas now that I'm older and it's not a first time read, it's this is like a second, or it's like a third or fourth. I can kind of absorb some of the more, I don't know, the more of the flavor of the atmosphere, the surroundings, the world. You know what I mean? Like, I start to catch all the little things more. And also having now like read all of his work, it you feel it different. You start to see the patterns. You start to see the things that will eventually become archetypes. You know what I mean? So yeah, it was great. It was great to reread it. I'm not usually the type of person who likes to reread a lot of the stuff I've read, because I feel like you've read it at a certain time when you kind of needed it. So it always feels weird to go back. But yes, Count Zero is still good, and considering how kind of obnoxious Bobby Newmark starts out, because Count Zero is Bobby Newmark, is how obnoxious he kind of starts out. That like that character goes through a fast evolution by the end of the book. And the thing is, I remember not liking him that much in Mona Lisa Overdrive. Because I felt like by the time you get to Count Zero and Mona Lisa Overdrive, there's like something really jaded about him at that point. And maybe that's just the inevitable, like, you can't live in the sprawl without eventually getting jaded of some sort or another. Except for the voodoo guys. You know, they didn't feel jaded. They seemed to be totally happy with their gods and their kind of corner of the universe. You know what I mean? Like it doesn't read as desperate as the first book by any stretch. Like Neuromancer there's like a certain level of like circling the drain desperation to that book.
Mm-hmm.
You know, whereas Count Zero feels like it's going in the other direction. It's like getting out of the drain and getting back into the world, because Turner gets out of the business and goes back to where he grew up, which is like kind of like what he keeps thinking about. And Count Zero gets out of the ghetto and becomes, you know, a big league hacker. And, you know, Angie ends up working as a SenseNet star, I think is what was the idea was what her was.
Yeah.
And yeah, everyone seems to head up. So it's kind of this weird element where, you know, it's the opposite of Neuromancer in a lot of ways. There's far more hope and happiness at the end.
Well, I read the books rapid fire, so I went right from one to the other. So I think for me, Count Zero was a nice kind of relief valve after the mania of Neuromancer. Although I do think it's easy for me to say, I'm not a writer, but I feel like starting off with the art dealer woman would have been a better opening, because I agree the Turner stuff is slow. It's a little off at first, so I wonder if putting that after the art dealer. But what do I know?
What's all
and then when
mixed
she
up.
gets to Mona Lisa Overdrive, then you have kind of you have at least two characters that completely invert themselves, or three really, because the Count is comatose. He's not even alive. He's dead or whatever. He's brain dead. And then what do you call it? Oh God, who's the other one? And the girl Angie, who was Mona,
Yeah.
is completely different from what she was in the last book. So I mean, you kind of like to go right from Count Zero to Mona Lisa Overdrive.
But there's a huge age gap between these two. Isn't there like a decade or more between them?
I think it's more. Yeah, I think it's like 14, 15 years. It's quite a while.
Yeah. So.
Yeah. But that's,
So
I mean,
yeah, I'll have to. I'm gonna go to Mona Lisa Overdrive after this and see how that feels.
Yeah. Well, and then you get Molly back. So.
Briefly, yeah.
Oh no, she's in it quite a bit.
I mean, she is the
She just
the
shows up,
consummate
goes away
badass
for like 2 or 3 chapters, then suddenly bursts back in through blowing through a door. And you're like, holy shit, okay. Because you know who she is right away. She's got a different name. So, but anybody who's reading the books knows who it is, because you don't. Once you hear, oh, she's got silver eyes, you know who you're talking about. So
yeah.
But Sally Shears is a pretty good name. I like that name. I mean, I know she's got something like 6 different names, but.
Well, you kind of have to in that business.
Well, I don't know that you ever find out what her real name is. I don't think that it ever got into it.
Yeah.
Now, So.
I told you about how there was a course I did. It was about sci-fi, and the thing they talked about the most in Neuromancer was the idea of like its isolation. Is that it was a book that's all about the isolating nature of technology, and the whole idea that Case is a character who has no real human relationships. And I'd never thought of it that way. And you're kind of like, yeah, he's right, because in the beginning of the book, he's really just circling the drain, like I said, and then the only relationship he kind of had was with Lyra Lee. What was her name?
Laura Lee? Is it
Laura Lee, yeah.
Whatever
And she gets killed early on, so he loses her. And then later on, when he goes into that kind of weird tech fever dream with Mintermoot, or no, he does it with Neuromancer, she shows up, and he puts her there, and then he has kind of this relationship with Molly, but it's the two of them. They are each of them using the other because the person they love is gone. So for Molly sees Johnny Mnemonic in Case, and Case sees Lee in Molly. They're both trying to so, and at the end of the story, Molly leaves, and they say with finality they never saw each other again. So it's like they never hooked up again. They never found each other. Like, that's it. Like, Case and Molly had this heist together, and they were very close, and then they went their separate ways.
Yeah.
Because she didn't want to see another Johnny Mnemonic happen.
Well, and that's what's great about it, is I do like the fact that her character is consistent the whole way through. That, like I said, I assume as a writer, much like an artist, kind of, if you're a comic artist and you create one great character, like Rob Liefeld loves the fact they created Deadpool, because look where Deadpool went. I assume as a writer it's the same thing. You create one great character, and you realize you kept that character consistent. You know what I mean?
But what's funny about that is that the Deadpool now is not his Deadpool.
No, but okay. In fairness, it's not exactly the same, but the
seed.
Basics were
he definitely
there.
created the seed of what the character would become.
Yeah, the character showed up as a wise ass. He just wasn't a fourth wall breaking meta character the way he is now. But still, he created Deadpool. So whatever, it's like Stan
whereas
Lee
like I don't,
the Fantastic
as a
Four.
writer,
Like,
I don't give a shit about the idea of creating a character.
not-
I'm more interested in the idea
intending
of creating
to,
worlds.
But if you wrote a character and then looked at it and realized, holy shit, this is a superb creation that nobody else has done, you have to look at that with
no,
you don't look at that any differently?
I don't think you do. I don't think you see it until many years down the road when everybody comes to you and repeatedly says,
yes, but that's what I'm saying.
So I was like, Gibson doesn't know that he created Molly and that Molly was fantastic until many years down the road when people were like, God, I love Molly. You know what I mean? Like Rob Liefeld didn't know that Deadpool was going to be great, because Deadpool could have just as easily been an X-Force secondary villain that no one came back to.
No, I'm misstating. I don't mean the kind of popularity part of it, but when you have to have written characters that you adore the way that you created the character just because you like the way the character works. Whether anybody else cares or not. You don't have a character or ones that you really like better?
No, I don't think so, because here's the thing. You cannot, as a writer, I was taught by several people, that you cannot fall in love with your characters. Because the thing is, if you love your characters, you will protect them. And the thing is that because you are essentially the god of the world that you're creating, if you have favorites, everybody knows. And the whole idea of a story is that to some degree, it's all the bad things that happen to your character that make a story. So, yes, they get through it somehow, right? And that's what's kind of amazing. But you still have to be willing to abuse your characters. So, I think the idea is that you build a character and then you run them through the ringer, and see how they come out the other end. So, like, do I have characters that I like? I'm fascinated by their psychology. And I think that's kind of more the thing for me. Like, right now I'm writing a character who's a clone, and through the course of the story, he's unintentionally removing his own psychological conditioning. He doesn't realize he's doing it. He doesn't realize he's conditioned either. You, the reader, will possibly put that together, but he doesn't think that he's been conditioned by the person who made him. And it isn't until the end of the story when he pulls a gun on the guy because he's to his creator that he's basically saying, you can't do that. And the creator says to him, well, you can't shoot me. He's like, I conditioned you guys. You think I would let you guys, out of the lab with the ability to kill me? It's like, what do we? And the main character has broken his conditioning because he's gotten heavily into philosophy, and the philosophy has allowed him to sidestep the conditioning. I like that evolution. I like creating that evolution. I like that thought process. But I don't love that character any more than I like other characters. You know what I mean? Like, you tend to... I mean, there are characters that are more fun because they're weird. Like, I created a character for the Chatsubo, which was like a weird strategy child who's halfway crazy. And I love writing him. And I have had him shown up in other stories because I always want him to be around. But then, like, I tend not to use him because he's too nuts. And I'm actually getting to use him in this book now because the book is sufficiently nuts enough that he shows up and it makes no difference. But I like the character, and I like to use him. I just haven't found the definitive world to put him in. But yeah, I don't think you can... you can't like your characters too much. You can be entertained by them. You can admire the psychology of them, but you can't love them. You can't protect them. You have to be a vengeful god, because otherwise there's no story. Like because we were just talking about Neuromancer. You can't. Gibson can't know that Molly's awesome. Molly is the badass of the story, but he can't know that she's awesome because he needs to mistreat her. He needs to put her through the ringer. He needs to put her through the whole story. She gets shot and fucking has one of her lenses cracked and gets the shit kicked out of her by the vat-grown ninja. And same with Case. I mean, Case is, through the Neuromancer, is just got the shit kicked out of, like, through the drugs and being pushed around and knowing that unless he's behind a console, he's the weakest guy in the room. He becomes godlike when he has a computer, but even there, he has to be given the tools to do godlike things. It's the weaknesses, it's the suffering that kind of makes characters fascinating. Sherlock Holmes will go. He is so fascinating as a character, but Arthur Conan Doyle hated him by the end. He desperately wanted to write anything else. He tried to kill the character. And the publishers made him bring the character back. And Conan Doyle wanted to write other shit. And it's like, now that's the flip, where you have a character that's so popular with people that they don't want you to create anything but. And this goes back to this goes up to like the George Lucas thing, where George Lucas said, after he'd made Star Wars, nobody wanted anything out of him but Star Wars. Which, it's kind of a weird statement, because, like, well, if you had enough money, you didn't have to. I mean, he didn't need to make the prequels. He had so much money by then, he could have made anything. He chose to make the prequels. But it's that idea that you can have these characters that that are super popular that you don't want to write anymore. I mean, you get this all the time with, like, book series, right? Where somebody writes a series, and let's say they get a character right? So they what do you call it? Longmire. I read the Longmire books. So let's say the guy who wrote Longmire, he wrote like 5 or 6 Longmire mysteries, and then he goes, "Oh, Jesus Christ, I can't stand this character anymore. I want to write something else." But you're stuck because you are the creator of that character, and people want that. And the publishers are like, "Yeah, that's great. You want to write something else, but can you write another Longmire book?" And then you, as an author who wants to get paid, are like, "Shit, well, I guess I'll write another Longmire book because that's what you want." And I totally get that. Listen, if tomorrow I had a certain character that was big and that was all people wanted, yeah, it's a job. So you're going to do it. I mean, same with you. I mean, listen, we were just talking about, about the art, doing art on the cards and things like that, right? I know that there's a part of you that wants to do comics, but if what people wanted from you was Magic the Gathering art, and that seemed to be your forte, that got paid, then that's the art that you're doing. Because you can do the other stuff on the side in your own time, but at the end of the day, you get paid for this art that people want. Yeah? So no, I mean, going back to the original question, no, I don't think you can... I think there's a lot of authors that don't know they've created a cool character, and I think that if they figure out that they have, it's to the detriment of the work. Because I've read stories by like rough drafts from authors where they clearly think their character's fucking awesome, and it reads that way, and it gets really it's just kind of weird to read. It's like it's too like circle jerky to read. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I guess I could see that.
Where you're like, oh, and then we'll call him like,
I guess, I guess it's just I look at it differently because I think of like
Dick,
Dave Stevens.
Dick
and,
Superman.
Dave
You're like,
Stevens
oh,
just did the Rocketeer.
My character, really. Dick Superman, he shows up and no one can hit him because he's so fast, and he dodges all the bullets, and he shoots everyone because aim is so good, and ladies love him, but so do the guys. They wish they were him. It's like my kids just saw Beauty and the Beast for the first time, and it's that song Gaston, where like everybody wants to be Gaston, right? Like that's what it comes off like. If it's like my character's so cool and everybody loves him, and it's like I think you can't know that you're cool. I think that's the key thing is you cannot think that it's cool. You can't. I mean, you can think that it's right, but you can't know that it's a cool character. I think that the second something knows it's cool, that makes it fundamentally uncool. You know what I mean? Like it's yeah. So like Molly's cool, but Gibson didn't know that. Gibson was just trying to make a female badass character that felt right. Yeah. I think, in fact, sometimes why movies bug us is because I think that when they're making the movie, I think that the director and the producer are like, we want this character to be really cool. And then when you're watching the movie, you're like, geez, this character's too... Like, you get that almost too cool effect. You know what I mean?
Well, that's always a danger, but I don't know that I think it's always a necessity. I don't think the knowledge that the character works very well is a precursor to it not working well.
Well, I think
George Miller's a good example, right? Mad Max. He's done all the Mad Maxes.
But the thing is, he didn't know when he made the first movie that character would be iconic.
No, but he certainly knew after the second one. And he made how many more?
I don't think so. I think that he liked the character, and he knew that there was an audience for the character. But even after the second one, I don't know if he knew that it was like an iconic character. It's kind of a weird thing because it's like we have these movies that we love that are iconic, but when they came out, I read this list recently of movies that are like iconic now, but they were like bombs when they came out. And it's like we forget that Blade Runner was a total catastrophe. Like, that movie did no money. That movie was a failure. And yet now we're like, oh my God, that movie's fucking fantastic. And it has this elevated status. But for a long time, that movie was Ridley Scott's failure.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that. I just don't know that you can't love a character. Like I said, I would use Dave Stevens as the Rocketeer. I just don't know who else would ever do it as well. And he knew what he had. That's why he did it for 30 years before, or almost before he died. I mean, he stuck with that because he realized that he liked the world, he liked the character, and it worked.
He liked the world, and he was getting paid. Well, I think that's the other aspect of that,
obviously, there's always... If you're going to die, you can't do a character you like. Like, okay, we got to put that aside. Let's assume
No, but that's what I mean. Like he liked that character, and he got paid for it. And that happens in comics all the time, where somebody does a character, and they do it really well.
Yeah, I think maybe that's the difference. I think with comics, I think maybe it is a visual thing, because I would love to just create one great character, and I would never do anything else. Assuming, yeah, of course, yes, you can't die from not doing a character. Like, dying for your art, I've already said.
No, but what I mean is, like, he kept doing Rocketeer because he did it well, right? Yeah. And regardless of whether he liked it or not, he did it well, and they paid him.
He loved that character. So that's what I'm saying is he was in love with the character.
And that's a bonus, right?
Yeah.
But what I mean is, if they hadn't paid him to do that character, then he wouldn't have been able to do it. To some degree, it was the popularity of the character that then drove it on. And if it hadn't worked,
but he didn't run it into the ground, because you said you have to, you can't love your characters. I think you can, but I agree that it's something that can go wrong. I mean, George Lucas, you can drive it into the ground with too much of your own adoration of what you made. There's certainly a danger to it.
Yeah.
So I guess it just depends. Certain creators can do it, certain ones can't.
But it's
And
also
maybe it is a thing
but
that's
it's also a
with
different.
Writing
But
is
it's
not
a
the same
different thing.
medium.
It's different arts. So the thing is, like, as a writer, because you're creating
That's what I'm saying. So I think it is
worlds
just the
and
difference in the
entire
art.
narratives, it's like, well, you need to be mean. Whereas, like, with you, it's like you're drawing these characters out. Even within your narrative, you can tell that somebody likes a character because they like to draw them. They like the look of them.
Yes,
you know
yes,
what I
yes.
mean?
Yeah, exactly.
And that's the thing, is that you can have an iconic looking character. You can have a character that feels that there's something very feng shui about how they look to you.
Right.
You know?
Yeah.
But that doesn't necessarily affect how mean the story is to them.
True.
Whereas
Yeah.
there's a less visual component for me to characters. It's more the psychological. It's more the behavioral. It's more who they are moving through this world that I've created.
I would guess that if you do love your characters, you actually have a harder job to keep them interesting.
Well, to ruin them, yeah, because it's the whole
Superman problem, right? Superman can beat everybody, so how do you make it interesting? Well, it ain't easy, because it often isn't.
You got to really hurt him. That's how.
Yeah. He's tough as a main character. He's better as a secondary who comes in and provides a contrast more than anything.
Well, that's why Batman.
Unless you're going to go the Kingdom Come route and make him kind of the evil, Dark Knight, and make him the tool of the state.
Well, and that's why it was so fascinating, the idea that they took the Boy Scout and they said, well, what would Frank Miller said, well, how would that naturally evolve? Well, eventually he'd have to work for the government, because that's the natural evolution of the Boy Scout, unless he turned against them, which is Kingdom Come, right? Where he turns away from it all.
Kingdom Come is he's too much of a Boy Scout, where he's like, well, somebody might die. And Wonder Woman's like, what are you, nuts? We're way past that.
Yeah, exactly.
You know? So yeah, it's challenging. I don't disagree. It's not easy.
Yeah. So yeah, I don't love any of my characters. I like the characters, and I like that I've created them, but I don't like, I guess I see them as people. So like when I look at a character, it's like I see the good and the bad. My wife used to think that I only wrote villains. Did I tell you about that?
Yes, I remember you saying. I don't know if you ever said it on the show. I remember you telling me.
Yeah, so my wife said to me that one of my problems was that I didn't really have any heroes. I wrote about villains because I was fascinated by like the explanation of why people do the things they do. So like the audiobook I'm doing right now, Artificial Fear, you're reading about a bunch of people who are fuck-ups. Like these are people who have been transferred away from whatever department
slow horses.
they were. Well, slow horses long before slow horses, yeah. And I can actually say that because that book was Artificial Fear came out years ago. But it's people who did something bad, and in some cases did something like really vicious, like that weren't necessarily evil, but they went over the line. They were bad cops, and they got sent to this police station on this far off planet in the middle of fucking nowhere that's being terraformed. And you're not meant to look at these people and be like, oh, they aren't icons. They aren't, these are people who have fallen to the end of the line. And what fascinates me is, okay, well, you're at the end of the line and you're presented with a situation of where you may not survive. How do you react to that? How do these people then act, and how do they respond, and what becomes important and what becomes not important? And that's what that book really is about. Somebody said in one of the reviews for that book, it takes forever to get to the battle. And I'm kind of like, yeah, that's because the battle was never the important part of that book to me. I knew everybody who was going to live and everybody who was going to die from the time I started writing it. What was fascinating to me is what they did in the time they had. Who did what? Who believed in what? How did these characters move forward? How do they face their demise in the end, right? And that fascinates me. But they're not heroes. They're not like they're protagonists, but they're not heroes. And in my second book, Break World, the main character Jackson's a fucking crazy guy. I mean, he's nuts, and either he is what he is or he isn't, and he's just fucking nuts. And like, I think part of the reason I kept the whole beginning of the story where you see him as a mercenary is this the idea to say that, yeah, this is not a good guy. This is a mercenary. He does bad things. And as the story goes on, you realize that, yeah, especially when he finds something, a cause worth being awful for, he's awful. There's a fabulous torture scene in that book that when I was writing it, I was like, that's a bit fucked up. And I was like, yeah, but this isn't me. This is the character. This is what he would do in the name of something he believed in. He is that kind of awful. Right? And what's funny, did I ever explain in that book why Breakworld is called Breakworld?
I haven't read it in a while, so I don't remember.
Well, I'm not going to say, just in case I did.
I
Or did or I didn't.
Say you did, but I could. Maybe you told me.
Yeah, it's okay. I'll let it be. I'll let it be because that is something that I after this current book I'm working on, my next project is going to connect to Breakworld. Yeah. In a roundabout way, it's going to connect back to it. And that concept of why Breakworld is called Breakworld will come up. So I was like, okay, I'll leave it then if I haven't said anything. But like I said, Jackson is not a good guy. And another thing is, I am more fascinated. I mean, my current book is about a bunch of clones from a mad scientist. And the mad scientist does good things, and he does fucked up things. There's kind of an amorality to him. So in a way, you're reading a story about the cloned henchmen to a mad scientist. And it's like, well, what happens to them when they are then thrust into the world and they have, abilities that normal people don't have? Are they bad? Are they good? What do they do? How do they respond? And I'm fascinated by that. That's the cool shit to me, So it's like, my wife thinks, I like to write about villains because villains are more interesting. But the thing is, they don't come off. Did Jackson come off as a villain in Breakworld?
I wouldn't say he came off as a villain, but I certainly wouldn't have called him a hero.
There you go, right? But it's because you see what's going on in his head. And the thing is, when you experience a character's logic...
I assumed that was intentional. I mean, that was
I would never write about truly despicable characters because I'm not fascinated, because I can't... If I can't make sense of the psychology, then I can't write about it. So, like, you're not gonna catch me writing about, actually, what's weird? I could probably write about necrophiliacs before I could write about pedophiliacs. Like, one of those... It's not that I identify... One of those makes... I could find an empathetic sense of why. Yeah. I would write about a necrophiliac before I write about a pedophile. And that's what I mean. Like, there's distances I can't go. Like, honestly, writing about it...
That would be more acceptable.
I mean, like, yeah, I know, right? So, but, like, serial killers, fucking easy. I could write about serial killers, murderers, career criminals, necrophiliacs. Shit, I could write about homicidal necrophiliacs, which means you can only fuck dead people that you've killed, right? I could write about all that, but there's certain areas that I won't go into,
Well, and with serial killers and murderers, they almost all have a charismatic version of them in popular media somewhere, but you don't find that for pedophiles.
No.
You don't.
Lolita. Isn't Lolita the charismatic version of that?
But she is the appealing one, not the guy who's,
Oh, yeah. He's still a creepy old dude, yeah.
He's so he's the pedophile.
Yeah.
She might just be misguided. He's a pedophile.
So there's villainy that I won't get into. But it's but yeah, like, I don't like writing about the goody two shoes aren't as interesting. It's the people who don't want to be there. Like, there's a short story I was throwing around about a world where they always talk about the what do they talk the futurists. They're always talking about, like, the moment. What do they call it?
The singularity.
The singularity, right? So I had this short story I was writing about what if the singularity was magic, right? So essentially, magic returns to the world, and suddenly everything is magic, right? All the technology has some level of magic in it, And my biggest issue with this book was that I couldn't figure out what my magic system was going to be, because I can't. I mean, I think we've talked about this. I can't write a book where there isn't a clear-cut system to how magic works, which I think defies the point of magic. But anyway, and I had this idea that this whole world was magical, right? And then you had this one guy who was considered a magic sink, and his only ability was that magic didn't work around him. He basically absorbed it and nullified it. And the idea of how miserable a life this guy has, because like the magic has so infused itself into all the technologies that this guy practically has to live like a hermit out on a mountain somewhere, where it's like, because he nullifies some of these events, it's like he can't have a magic phone, he can't have magic plumbing, he can't have any. He has to go old school, and he has to find old school people who know how to run this technology without magic, right? And then his job is essentially working for anyone who wants to pay him to act as a magic nullifier. So like governments, law enforcement, anyone who wants to try and not have some kind of magical assassination will hire him just to be around them. And I like the idea of that in a magical world, what happens to the one person who's incapable of enjoying it, right? And so incapable that it then makes his life even worse, right? Where it's like, yeah, you can't use anything unless it's pre-magic technology. But nobody wants to maintain pre-magic technology, because why do it the hard way when you can do it the easy way and wave a wand? And I like the idea of that kind of bullshit. Like that interests me. But that's miserable for the main character. And it's like, I can't love that character. Like, I can enjoy the psychology of it and enjoy the character, but I can't love that character. I wouldn't be able to be horrible to him. And it's the horror that makes it interesting to the reader. So, yeah. Anyway, an hour in. What do you got?
Well, I have one review, but I wanted to talk about, this isn't really a review, but I went back and forth because S.T.A.L.K.E.R 2 released, it was this week. I think it was early. No. Yeah, I think it was early this week. Anyway, whatever. It released within the last week. And I've talked a bunch of times about, I love all the S.T.A.L.K.E.R stuff, including the games, the originals. And this game has had a very long development to the point where most people had written it off, saying it was never going to come out.
Oh, the actual sequel came out.
Yeah, the sequel to the game. And it was,
oh, shit.
The developers are in the Ukraine, so of course they've been under, basically war conditions.
Oh, that's no excuse. I don't see why they didn't get it out the door.
Yeah, between the pandemic and that's where I think most people said, okay, this game's never happening. And it actually has come out. And the easiest way, and so I went back and forth, because it came out, and as most games do, it came out and it had a number of bugs, and it's not optimized, so the frame rate can be all over the place depending on how you're running it, even on a really, really good machine. So I wasn't going to get it, and then I thought about the fact that I really don't care, because the first game was buggy and a mess and would crash and everything, and I still adore it. So I thought, you know what?
Well, the content.
I'm just happy
you
this
like the
game.
Content.
Yeah, the content. And I kept reading, they were like, okay, a modern person who never played the originals probably will hate this game. But if you love the originals, it's just that with a new story, a new character, and better visuals. So as long as you're okay with that, and I'm like, I'm okay with that, bye. And so I bought it. That was really the thing. And it really is that, because I've played it. I've been playing it now I probably got about 10 hours in or so. I haven't progressed very far, but that's okay, because I'm just kind of wandering around. And that's the thing. The intangible about this game that is it open world? Hard. Yes, it's basically. I'm trying to remember. Hold on, I'm trying to remember It's an insanely huge map that you really can just. No,
is there a lot of empty to it?
No. If anything, what will probably put off most people is how random it is. I've reloaded a game 3 or 4 times and had several different variations of walking in a straight line, because there's all this dynamic stuff that can happen. No, I'm not kidding, because the idea is there's really 3 main threats with it. I'm barely even into the story. So literally you start off, I guess you're some kind of research, either mercenary or research associate, where they're studying the zone. So it's a sequel. It takes place in the same world. And you're out there and you're trying to plant these scanners that you're putting this artifact that somehow manifested. I don't even know what the background is yet of what happened. It looked like you were in a place where a bomb went off, and somehow you had this piece of artifact which has never really been seen outside the zone. Normally outside the zone, artifacts lose their power, but yours has remained somehow charged or whatever. And so the scanner kind of goes crazy, and then these two factions show up, and then you end up waking up and you've been rescued. Now you have to kind of try to figure out what's going on. So that's the story of it. So same world. And in that world, the whole world is hostile. That's, I guess, the best way to put it. The entire world is a hostile area. So even if there were no other living beings, there are random anomalies. There are these things like literally I was walking and I wasn't paying attention. Suddenly I got sucked up into the air and I got blown up. And because like in the movie, you have an unlimited supply of just bolts and you're supposed to throw them. And if you listen, you're paying attention, you'll start to hear that the air is moving differently. And I just wasn't. And so, I just have a habit of, as I'm walking, I'll just randomly throw a bolt straight ahead of me. And you see if anything happens. That's the idea. Because some things are easy to tell.
Does this feel like Death Stranding at all?
Yes and no. Death Stranding is far more
in the sense
empty.
that Death Stranding felt like somebody who'd loved S.T.A.L.K.E.R. made a weird game.
Yes.
Right?
But Death Stranding was much emptier in that you could go long stretches and encounter nothing except the terrain itself was the challenge. Because literally if you fell over, the cargo would be ruined. So that was much more of a very realistic kind of FedEx simulator where the goal, and it's not even an exaggeration, you got a package you had to bring somewhere. Well, if you fell just a couple of times, it would be ruined and the mission would fail. So you just had to figure out realistically how to traverse the terrain, and that was the challenge. And then there were these kind of random instances where, yes, there were the invisible beings, and, you had to be careful and that type of thing. But you could always tell when those were going to happen. It was pretty choreographed. Not choreographed in that it was like a cutscene that triggered, but you could tell when you were entering that territory. It became very clear because you were wearing a thing that would go crazy, and it would tell you, oh, those things are ahead of you. And you could just back up, and then you were safe. Whereas in S.T.A.L.K.E.R., I would be walking from one place to another, and suddenly I would start hearing shooting. And then the people would see me and they'd start shooting. So I'd turn around and run, at which point a pack of mutant dogs would get on me and kill me instantly. Next time I reload it, no mutant dogs, no enemies, but then I stumble into this warped field that blows me up. That was in a completely different spot. Because once I got past that certain point, I thought I was safe. Well, there is no safe. That's the thing. And it's very tough up front. Because you have essentially very weak weaponry. There is no radar. So you will kind of know when somebody is seeing you. There'll be an alert. But they go from alerted to being able to one-shot you in 2 seconds. They hit you in the head, you're dead. There is no shielding. There is no... I think you can get a helmet, but even that is not complete protection. The shooting is very realistic in that you can shoot right at them. And if you're using a machine gun, good luck. It's going to jump all over the place. So you might get them, and they miss you too. But if they hit you and you start bleeding and you can't kill them all before you bleed out, you die. So you have to bandage yourself, which means you have to get behind something. If you're in an open field, forget it. You're finished. Anomalies can just spring out of nowhere. There's these giant super electrical storms that you have to take cover from. So it's a very, very
So they really
aggressive
encapsulated this idea of what a hostile alien environment would be like.
Yes, exactly. And that's appealing to me because the other side of that is the game doesn't tell you how to solve anything. It lets you solve things. In fact, I figured something out because I was running from these giant, mutant pigs. I don't know what they're even supposed to be. But I was in this area and I'm supposed to be hunting down mutant dogs and getting these radioactive collars off them. And then I saw these warthog things come in and they were fighting the dogs, and then one of them saw me and started to chase me, and I saw one of these warp fields, and I went around it, and I thought, well, wait a minute. Can I put the warp field between myself and the pig, and will it know enough to go around it? And it did not. It ran right into it, and it blew itself up. So then I lured the other one, shot it a couple times, had it chase me, went around the same way, stood there shooting at it, and it ran right into the thing and blew itself up. So the game systems work against the NPCs and the enemies as much as they work against you. You can actually manipulate the systems to work for you. So once I realized the pig things don't like the dogs, then I kept looking to where the dogs were. I was like, well, are there any of those pig things nearby? And I would run through the dog camp with them and then keep running and turn around. They're all busy killing each other then because the pig things went after the dogs, and the dogs are a pack. So when some of them were being attacked, since I was leaving, I was no longer the threat. The pig things were. So they turned around and went back. So that's my kind of game. Now, it can be very punishing. I literally got killed at one point and had no idea how it happened. I heard a gunshot, never saw where it came from. I was dead. Then I reloaded, and that person wasn't there anymore. Because then I was kind of scrambling from cover to cover. And then after a certain amount of time, I went, okay, well, those... Because it's all randomly generated. There are missions that will have enemies. So I'm not going to say everything is randomized. There are missions you take and side missions and all that stuff. But the world itself is just always shifting. Which means that, we were playing... in GTA Online, we were playing a mission. And there's a thing where you have to find these fuses. And we were getting very frustrated because we couldn't find the fourth fuse. And finally, Lando said, just look it up. And I went to look it up, and the thing I looked up said, oh, no, they're randomized.
That's because we
no
come from the Nintendo Power generation.
Yes.
Where,
and most games are like that.
So you check the guide to be like, okay,
And many games are set up that way, where you can find the thing. So this is like that, where in between the main points, like that fuse mission, we knew that we were going to have to fight all those juggernauts once we got to a certain point. That was not going to change. Their location did change because there wasn't one where we expected there to be one, but we knew there was going to be a certain amount we'd have to fight, and sure enough, we had to. But that's the same here, where certain mission things are going to always be the same, more or less, but the environment is very fluid around those missions. So you'll get a thing where somebody says, oh, I heard that somebody left a gun here. And I went to this place, and I don't know what was going on there, because there was this whole thing where a person left a note saying, I think something is moving out here. And then you just see blood on the floor. And so I kept waiting for something to jump out, and nothing ever did. And I don't know if that means that the guy was killed by a person and just thought they heard something not supernatural, but, superhuman, I guess, because these are mutated things. Or is it that when I was there, it did not trigger that randomly? I don't know. And I don't care.
Does it remind you of Annihilation at all?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, because the whole place has been... the whole basis of it is that the Chernobyl... it wasn't really an accident. It was triggered by human beings somewhat. That transformed everything. So this is not... The book is aliens came and left the stuff. And that's pretty much what the movie is too. But this is all terrestrial based. This was man-made, and this is all just transformed through radiation. So you have these monstrous beasts, but they are not aliens. There is no alien anything in here. It is simply the radiation and the explosion itself that has transformed the area into what seems like an alien environment, but there is no alien influence whatsoever in this thing. There is not. Okay. It is all terrestrial. But in what the zone is, yes, it's very much like Annihilation, where you will come to these places and they're just different. And, even when I've walked through areas where, and the other thing I like, and some people will really hate this, is there is no driving, there are no fast travel. You have to traverse the entire thing. And a lot of people don't like that. But I think this game, I think anything else would destroy the tension of it.
Well, listen, so Joe and I have been playing a lot of GTA Online recently because we don't have anything else to play. And one of the things about that game is if you want to get anywhere, you got to drive. There's no warping, right? And on one hand, it's annoying, but on the other hand, it does give you some scope. You can't just instantly jump. I mean, what were we playing right before this?
Far Cry, right? Far Cry 6.
Yeah, and Far Cry, where we were warping all over the map.
Yeah.
But in this case, it's like, no, you can't warp. You have to drive there or fly there or something, and it gives everything more weight because you can't just magically teleport. It's like being on the Enterprise with no transporter.
Correct. Yeah. So, they have calculated. So the original S.T.A.L.K.E.R, which was a pretty good-sized map, was about 7.5 square kilometers. That's the original games. The map in this game is 64 square kilometers that you can walk the entirety of.
Wow. What's the size of the GTA 5?
Oh, okay, that's a GTA 5.
Gotta give it a good comparison.
Size in square kilometers. Let's have a look. Video game maps comparison tables. Oh, of course there is. Whoa. Oh, this is interesting. What?
78 square
okay,
kilometers.
okay.
75. So GTA
okay.
5 is 75.8 square kilometers. So it's pretty fucking big.
Yeah.
Because GTA 5 is a really nice big map.
So yeah, so it's about the same size. It's slightly smaller than that. However, you can only walk. You can't drive.
Whoa.
And there's no flying. Right. And it is, again, I can't recommend it to everybody because it is merciless. It does save fairly often. It has an autosave, which some modern games don't, like Pacific Drive, which is inexcusable.
Yeah.
So at least you won't lose 2 hours of progress, but you can literally... There was a fight that I was in where you because some of the characters from the first game, specifically, there's one faction that was called Monolith, and they were like a religious zealot group of soldiers who worshipped the Wish Granter, which is this, it's in the S.T.A.L.K.E.R film, you never actually see it, so you don't know if it's real. In the game, it is there. It is real. You can actually reach it. It is the bad ending of the game, but you can't reach it. And so they worship that. And they were enemies in the first game. So then in the second game, because if you played the first one, everybody thinks Monolith is evil because of the actions that they took before, in the prequel, I guess the first game. I shouldn't say prequel, but the first game. So you run into this person. They were in this tunnel, and he says, "Oh, a Monolith guy grabbed my friend. He's going to make it into a zombie. You have to rescue him." Because the Monolith guys operated in a very zombie-like fashion, so I think the mythology is that people thought they were zombies. And you could sort of see, if you play the first game, there are things that are weird about them that happen that could be supernatural, but you end up finding out, no, in fact, they're a projection of this group of scientists who have join their brains together in a ring consciousness called the C consciousness, and they're projecting their psychic energy out. So it's not really supernatural. It's just, again, superhuman. Or
assholes. It's
metahuman.
assholes.
That too. Yeah, you can actually join them in the original game, and that's considered a bad ending, but you can do it, and then you help them control the world. So you assume the Monolith guy is actually evil, and then you reach the place where this guy is, and you see the Monolith guy is just there, and he's praying still to the Monolith, to the Wish Granter, and you find him, but he doesn't attack you. And you can talk to him, and when you talk to him, you realize that, oh no, the Monolith kind of disbanded, so they keep track of each other, but they sort of just fell apart, and they've realized that nobody's ever going to trust them, kind of rightfully so. So he's like, no, I didn't kill the guy. A mutant attacked them, and I brought him back here because he would have died if I didn't help him. And you find the guy is actually being treated. And then all of the guys who know the other guy who escaped show up, and they're like, we know he's here. And when you come out, because you say to the guy, well, what do you want me to do here? And he's like, well, I don't think you should get yourself killed for me. They want me. And you could say, well, I don't think they should kill you. He's like, well, you can try to talk to them, but do you think they're really going to listen to you? I don't think they care.
Yeah, so how's the interaction? Are there dialogue bubbles? Is that what happens?
Yes,
like
there are
tree?
choices, but you can't really, certain ones can be influenced and certain ones can't. So the first time I did that mission, I went out and talked to the guys, and I said, hey, you got it wrong. He's helping him. And they were like, oh, he's controlling you. He's got you. And they immediately started attacking me. And so I killed them all, but then I found that they had killed the Monolith guy. And I really sat there for a couple minutes and went, I'm not happy
How do I
with
do
that.
this?
So I reloaded it, right? And I went out and I tried the different dialogue option, and the only other dialogue option was to join them and go hunt the guy down. And by the time I killed them all from behind, they'd already gotten him. So then I reloaded a third time, and then I got to the guy, and you see that when he's trying to he goes up to the building and he stands at the doorway with his gun ready. And so I thought, well, what if I just close the door? So I just closed the door on him, and then I went out and I killed everybody else, and then he lived. And so then I went back to the guy who had originally hired me, and I told him what happened, and he was like, not happy. He said, look, I'm going to pay you because I don't want the reputation to be that I don't pay people when they do what I ask them to. He's like, but I don't know how you could possibly side with him. And some of the other guys in here, they're not going to understand it all. So you better watch your back. So now I don't know if eventually that's going to come back to bite me because there are factions involved. I don't know how aware they're going to be that I killed everybody because I only told the one guy, and he certainly didn't make it sound like he was going to tell everybody, But I wonder if there's going to be more of those opportunities that come up to help the Monolith guys.
But he's not your friend anymore.
Well, no, you can still get missions from him, but he basically sort of tolerates it by saying, you're new here, so you may not know everything that went on before. I can understand that, but some of the other guys will not. But understand that those guys are monsters. So I'm wondering, will the game allow me some way to be able to bridge that gap?
So why is he not a
know.
monster now to you? Because the thing is, you protected the monster. So why is he not a monster?
Well, because there's a lot of people will just attack you on sight.
Yeah.
Immediately. He didn't. He basically stood up without a weapon. And when I talked to him, he explained what happened. And I noted, and this is an interesting thing, because I really think this is one of those times where the game puts the responsibility on you. When I was in the tunnel where the other guys were dead, when I got to the one guy who was still alive and healed him, and he was like, yeah, he's the one who says, he's got my friend, he's going to make him a zombie. I looked around the room because I was just looking for stuff to loot, because that's what you do. If there's a body, you try to take anything off it, because you do have to manage a number of things, and your stuff can break, and you try to sell weapons because you need money to buy ammunition. Ammunition is a expensive resource. So as I was looking around, I did notice that there was this giant hulking mutant that had been torn in half, and there was an anomaly in the room, which I think is what killed it. So when I got to the Monolith guy, he said, no, I didn't kill anybody. This mutant did. And since I saw the mutant on the floor, it logically made sense to me that was at least plausible. Now, I don't know for sure. He could have been lying. But after I killed all the rest of the guys, had he been lying, I would have assumed he would have turned on me and just killed me. Because why kill everybody else and not me?
Yeah.
But he didn't. He said, all right, I'm going to keep taking care of him, and then I'm going to disappear, because obviously they're never going to stop coming. They're just going to hunt me down until I'm dead. But he's like, but I'll stay here another day and get this guy up and running on his feet, and then I'll leave. So I'm wondering if I'll run into that guy later. I don't know. I'm really curious what the game's going to do. But like I said, if you
don't know how clever they are with it, how much they're going to follow through on your decisions.
Well, also, even if they don't, seeing the dead mutant on the floor, I could easily have never seen that if I hadn't looked at the floor and been looking around. If I had just been kind of talked to the guy and then went right up the stairs, I might never have seen it. And so then when the guy said it, I would be more dubious of it, because I remember Monolith from the first game, and they were hardcore enemies. But that was also before the Sea Consciousness got disbanded and all the rest of it. So were they under control? I don't know. It's unclear. But I like that the game doesn't tell me a clear answer. It's letting me form parts of the narrative myself. That might irritate some people. I happen to love it, so it doesn't bother me.
Well, this
it
is
does
like
definitely
playing,
have bugs.
Was it the early days of Fallout?
Fallout 76, yes, exactly.
76, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, early on, you showed up in that game and there was nothing. No guidance, nothing. You were just there.
Right.
And certain people hated it.
Yes, they did.
And certain people like us wandered around going, this is the weirdest thing. I don't know what's going on.
And it was great. It's environmental storytelling versus direct narrative storytelling.
It's a different game is what it is to me at this point.
It's a much different game. I think, again, the easiest thing, and a lot of the reviews have said this, and I think they're absolutely correct, if you loved the original, including some of the jankiness, which I haven't run into a lot of that. I've seen a couple of weird things here and there. It definitely does have some performance issues. You see some slowdown and certain things happening. That doesn't bother me. I don't care. I just turned a couple of settings down because I'm fine if I can't see the reflection of the folds of my ass crack in a mirror. I'm all right. I'm fine. Thanks. Some people get hung up on that. I don't. My eyes aren't good enough anyway. But even if they were, I don't think I would care. But the world itself feels very different from most modern games in that it really is just not caring. There are games you can speed run because you can figure out their patterns and they repeat, and you can figure out the boundaries of the world very clearly and you know how to operate in them. This one, its boundaries are so few and far between because literally I've reloaded and run the same route 5 or 6 times and never encountered the same scenario twice. And I think that's a positive. Some people will be very irritated by that because you can get killed by something you never see that came out of the left field and you don't even ever know it was there. So you have to be very situationally aware. You have to really listen to the sounds of what's going on and try to work out, in some cases, like that monolith thing, that's a total your individual call. It didn't really impact. In fact, I got paid less because I helped him. So the sensible thing would have been to kill the monolith guy. I would have gotten paid more, and all the stalkers would have been like, yay, we killed another monster. But I don't know that I think that guy was a monster. There's enough reasonable doubt that I couldn't commit to it because I didn't have enough evidence to say the guy was wrong, or evil, I guess. And It did appear he was helping the other guy, and I saw that dead mutant, which the other guy neglected to mention. So he probably didn't see it because there are mutants that can throw you. So he said, I got thrown against a wall. And he said that the monolith guy did it. But it's very possible he hit the anomaly, or that is this game's version of a controller mutant that can psychically throw stuff or throw you. Because there was a part where I came across this boat that had been beached where there was probably an ocean or a lake. And I walked into it, and boxes just started getting thrown at me poltergeist style. I never saw what was doing it. I just left. Because I'm like, I am not at a level where I can fight whatever this is. So I just left.
Yeah.
And I don't know what's there. I might go back at some point. I might never see it again. But I just knew I couldn't. If it's the same type of poltergeist enemy from the first game, you have to have some armor on you to fight those, because they will just throw everything Darth Vader style at you. So I was like, nope, I am way too early in this game to be fighting this thing. And I just left. So I'm enjoying the hell out of it. Again, if you like the first game, this is the same thing except with a new storyline. For now, I don't know if we'll encounter S.T.A.L.K.E.R. It would be interesting if we did, because I did the good ending of the last game, and that's the one where he kind of is free of all the stuff that was kind of haunting him. I don't know what he would look like now, or if he'd even still be in the zone. I know some of the characters...
They'd have to pick an ending.
Well, there is what's considered the good ending, so it would be the one that I played. Any of the other endings end up with you dead one way or another. If you join Seek Consciousness, you'll blow up. If you get any of the negative Wish Granter endings, you die, or... I think there's one where you go blind, but I would assume that being blind in the zone means you'll be dead, because you won't see a gigantic flesh warthog that will come and kill you. So you'd almost certainly have to be dead. But like I said, I'm enjoying it. The only problem is that there are a lot of reported bugs. So there are people who report it won't even launch, that type of thing. So if you're at all concerned about that, and there's no way to really know, everybody's systems are so different. Unless you're playing on like Xbox, which, then it's going to work. At least it'll launch.
And this is why I stand by the whole just play it on a console.
Yeah, and unfortunately it's not on the PlayStation. That's the only bummer, because right now it's an Xbox exclusive. Probably not for long, but for now.
That's probably why I didn't hear about it.
Yeah, right now it is Windows or the Xbox consoles. Yeah, so anything can run Steam, which would be a PC, and Xbox for now. But Microsoft is realigning their entire business strategy. There will be no more exclusives at a certain point. So that's going away. They've realized that they can't win that way, that they just want to sell games to whoever wants to buy them. So I would assume that Stalker 2 might be a 6-month exclusivity thing. And honestly, if you have other things to play, it's probably not the worst idea to wait anyway, because it does seem to have some performance issues. This is like a Fallout game to me, where I'm like, I don't care, I'm buying it. There are exceptions to that rule. Plus, I want to support the developers because, they're in a war zone, and they're the only ones who are developing a sequel to a game I adore, and I still don't think there's quite anything else quite like. So for me, it was easy to do, and I'm like, okay, fine. If it doesn't run or whatever, I'll wait it out, and I'm sure they will patch it eventually. But I've had no real problems with it. The frame rate dips below 60 here and there. I don't care. That's okay with me. I turned it from epic settings at 4K down to 1080 with the high settings. And I know some people go, oh my God, the jagged edges. I don't care. It's fine. Sorry, I don't care. It looks good. I played the original last year. You think it doesn't look a lot better than that, even on low settings? You're goddamn right it does. So,
No, but the jagged edges, no.
All right, well, it's... Younger people may get more hung up on that because their eyes are better. My eyes suck. So, the jagged edges, through my myopic vision, soften themselves. I don't know what to tell you, you know? So, I like it. I don't know if the story's going to be as good as the first one, because I actually really like the first game story. And the sequels, you know, especially whatever the second one was called. It was Clear Sky and... What was the other one called? It was S.T.A.L.K.E.R. Shadows of Chernobyl, Clear Sky. God, I don't remember what the third one was called. I don't even remember which one the third one was. The second one's not as good. The third one's fine. Like I said, the first one is really the best one. This feels very... I mean, it's the same map. And that's another thing, too, is that you'll see some of the evolution of some of the places that you knew before. That's interesting to me, too. Since I played the game last year, it's still somewhat fresh in my mind. And, you know, if you're a fan of the original, you'll probably like this. But at the same time, if you want to wait until the performance and the bugs are kind of a little bit more squashed out, I understand that. But whenever you play it, if you didn't like the first one, don't play this. It's the first one again. Not in terms of the story or anything, but it's the same mechanics. It is a specific type of gameplay, and it is punishing at times. I don't think unfairly so, because it does allow you to kind of adapt your playstyle. But it does not hold your hand. And some people are not going to like that. That's not a criticism if you don't. There are games that people love that are punishing that I don't. Dark Souls. So I understand that some people like...
Honestly, I get a strong Dark Souls vibe at times when you're talking about this.
Well, the difference is Dark Souls... Okay. The one Dark Souls game I played, what became very clear to me is the whole basis of those games is you have to figure out and memorize and repeat and execute a combat strategy with a single character. A character is going to attack you a certain way. You do anything other than the exact right way to do things, or within reason, you know, obviously there's little variance, but not much, you are going to die. That's it. This is that, except that it's giving you far more tools to approach whatever the situation is. And you do have the option, unlike in Dark Souls, for the majority of the Dark Souls games, they're fairly linear. You go to level 2. This is the boss of level 2. If you don't kill that boss, you're not going to level 3. That's it. In this one, if you get to an area and you take a mission, you're like, oh, no, I can't fight this thing. You can then go do other missions, figure out what equipment you need. You can take the time. You can kind of build yourself up, get the right equipment. Maybe you get more healing items and you stick with what you like using, or maybe you get a different weapon that you feel like might do a better job against it, maybe better armor. And so then you can come back when you're ready and you can progress. In Dark Souls, I don't think you can do anything like that. You can't just decide to skip level 2 and wander over into sub-level 3. No. You have to beat the boss of level 2. And that's it. There's the main story, but there's so many side missions. I've done almost none of the main story so far. I've been doing all the little side missions because I want to wander around. I want to see where I can find maybe some random anomalies because those are randomly generated. There's lots of little stuff that allows you to take the game at its own pace. So in terms of, are there insanely weird and what may feel like unfair difficulty spikes? Yes. The difference is those difficulty spikes can easily go against the enemies. Because, like I said, I started using the anomalies and the creatures against themselves. And that made the second run on that dog camp a lot easier. I barely had to do anything. Because I figured out how to draw them in and then use the anomaly against them. Now, if I reloaded, that anomaly might not have been there. It might have been a much tougher fight. I don't know. But I like the fact that I can't just figure out something easily. I have to actually kind of think. I don't have to sit there and watch it for 60 minutes to figure out soldiers' like walking patterns. But I also, you will be rewarded if you
familiar.
kind of, yeah, no, there's, I've played games like that where you have to literally just watch everything.
Also, wait.
I don't necessarily mind that, but what I like is that you just can, okay, I'm going to this camp. I can just circle around the camp and see what's there, and then just start to come in whatever way I want. If it doesn't work, well, then I'll come from the other side of the camp and see what happens. I like that type of stuff. I think they call it emergent gameplay because it's not really mapped out for you. You kind of, the gameplay emerges based on your response to the situation. Kind of like what Prey did, stuff like Deus Ex, System Shock, those type of things, where the game just gives you the tools and then says, all right, you solve the problem however you want. I'm okay with that when I don't think it's unfair and when it is done with an interesting environment. Stalker's greatest asset is that it feels like a very unique, weird environment to be in. And so you kind of want to go back to it because it's never threatening to the point of being a horror game. There are horrific elements, but it's not oppressive, but it is threatening. But threatening in a way where you don't feel like you can't withstand it if you are careful about it. And I respect that type of thing. When it's done right, it's very satisfying. When it's done incorrectly, it just feels like the game is just never going to let you progress. That I don't like. So I don't think it's not really a review. That's just my impressions so far.
No, that's fine.
Now,
that is a review.
Now, as for the actual review, I watched the movie.
Oh, wow. That wasn't even the review. Holy shit.
Oh, no. That's my impressions of Stalker 2. I have not finished it. I will never say I've reviewed a game I haven't finished. So I call it impressions. Those are my impressions thus far. As for the review, the thing I did watch and finish, that was the sequel, even though annoyingly it has the exact same title as the original. There was a sequel made to one of my favorite garbage films of all time, which is 1987's Street Trash, which is a legendarily well-known melt movie that is easily one of the most filthy films ever made. Not filthy in terms of smut, but just looks dirty. It makes you feel dirty because of when and where it was filmed, which is the worst parts of New York in the late 80s. So a sequel was made in Cape Town, South Africa, called Street Trash, annoyingly. And it was made by an individual named Ryan Kruger, who I guess has made a couple other, let's see, what has he done? Director-wise, he has done what? He's done more than a few movies. He did, a lot of people know a movie called Fried Barry. I haven't seen it, I'll be honest. But that's the one he's kind of well known for.
Is this more recent?
Oh, it's this year. 2024.
Oh, wow.
Is the
Okay,
Street
yes.
Trash movie. Yeah.
A nauseating gore and 80s sleaze.
Yes. That's the new one or that's the old one?
Yeah, that's the new one.
Okay. So this is the thing. What they attempted to do in this movie was they tried to graft a story onto it, which is that in the original, for those who have not seen it, and I would highly recommend it, it is something that is unforgettable, and I use that word very specifically. In the original movie, what melts the homeless individuals is a liquor called Viper. And that liquor is found by a convenience store owner in the back room behind like some old wood, and it's clearly gone bad. So he's selling it for cheap to basically, essentially the homeless, because he knows they'll pay for cheap liquor. And what it does is, for some reason, it causes them to very violently melt in Technicolor goo. So it's not blood. It looks like runny, silly, Play-Doh. It's like bright Bob Ross colors. If you look up images, you'll see what I'm saying. Like one guy turns into a toilet face, and he's like the bright blue, purple, reds, and pinks. So it's not even bloody. I hesitate to even call it a horror film. This one too. They refer to both as black comedies. There is an element of that. There is a long extended sequence where they are playing volleyball with a severed penis, which is referenced in the new film. It's probably the most famous sequence of the original film is the penis volleyball scene, where you are seeing it. That they're not hiding it. They're throwing around a prosthetic penis very clearly. There is very little left to the imagination in that first film, which is where some of its infamy comes from. So in this film, but there's never a story. You don't know why the Viper's making them melt, except that it's gone bad. But there's no purpose to it. Nobody says, there's no scientist going, I knew there was a way to melt people.
At last, I've melted the homeless.
Well, okay, or this was designed for military applications, and we wanted to test it on the homeless because who would care? It just melts people, and that's all there is. The story as it exists, and it's barely a story, is of two homeless brothers that live in a junkyard, and they tend to be the central characters. But it's barely any story at all. It's really just more of the exploitive nature of, well, the movie was made to test out Steadicam. The guy who made the movie ended up being the Steadicam guy for Hollywood for a long time, and he was testing the rig out. So there's lots of scenes where you see like the camera running along the ground, and that's because he was figuring out how to do Steadicam work. That was the purpose. He was like a film professor or something, and made this for nothing with some of his students, the original. So in this one, there is a story, which is that the mayor of this dystopian future city has promised his rich constituents that he will solve the homeless problem, and so he's using this chemical to kill them. That's the idea. Is he's trying to get it aerosolized so that he can send out these...
He turned it into social commentary.
Exactly. And honestly, it doesn't matter, but there are parts of the movie where they try to make things actually weighty and emotional, and it's so out of place with the rest of the film that it comes off as goofy. So I don't really care, but it doesn't work. It's that simple. It really does not work, because this is a movie where, far more to its credit than the first film, people melt constantly. They explode. And what I love about it is almost all of it is practical. And they're using a lot of the balloon effects where, like, there's a balloon underneath latex that's is swelling. And you can see, like, the paint is filling it up and then blows up.
Have you ever seen, you know those vinyl wraps they can put on cars? It's like a vinyl layer instead of painting. Have you ever seen how they take that off?
Yeah, same idea.
Yeah, they stick air in there and they blow. It looks like the car is, like, deforming. It's so weird looking.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
So imagine that on human bodies. That's what it is.
Yeah.
Now, those effects are so good that I would recommend watching it, even with the goofy kind of narrative. Who cares? Because there's so much of it, and it's so lovingly done. This is clear. And I remember seeing interviews where the guy was saying, and they always say, oh, I love practical effects. I fell in love with it. And, you don't know if they really mean it or not. In this movie, they clearly meant it, because sometimes the effects are clearly not realistic, but they are absolutely practical. They are being done in actuality. And so many times people, and they melt in different ways. So there's a couple of them where they're pulling their own faces off, or, like the skin is like one guy's manacled and he kind of pulls his arm through, pulling the whole layer of skin off, and then it's like skeletal. There's one guy who comes out and he's melting and a truck hits him and it like just knocks his head off, and then the body's just left there. And it's clearly a dummy that they actually hit and had the head come off. There's all this really wonderful effects work. And the thing is, it's never horror-based because it's not blood. It's these bright... I mean, if you look at screenshots, you'll see it. It's really bright colors. So it doesn't even come off as horrific. There is some blood in it, but barely any. Most of the time, it's like Joel Schumacher, Batman and Robin, black-lit colors exploding off of people. And so it's weird because they are getting killed, including some of the main characters who are the heroes of the film. And yet, because the colors are so big and over the top, and
I wonder if you watched it in black and white, if that would make it more gory, because you'd lose the colors.
That's an interesting idea, actually. I would be curious. I can probably recolorize it.
Yeah, I just curious, because black and white. If you think about it, like Psycho.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
The blood was actually just chocolate syrup, right?
Sure.
But because you can't see the brown, it looks like blood. So if all the bright colors are gone, would making it black and white make it far gorier?
Yeah, I don't know. It's a very good question, though. Yeah. It probably would, because it would. Well, yeah, I guess it would just look like blood then, I guess. So yeah, it probably would be more horrific that way. But like I said, it's as is. I would say anybody who just likes special effects, and they are technically gory. I would not show this to children, certainly. But like I said, it's never horrific because the colors are so bright. like stuff you would find in the basic Crayola box Bright. And so that diffuses a lot of the horror from it. The narrative is completely pointless. I don't have any problem with the actors and the people in it. The one character feels like I don't know. I would be curious what actual Jewish people would infer from the performance, because it feels like a very over-the-top, like early 80s, that Jewish guy, the accent he's doing and stuff, I don't know that it's realistic. It feels like something out of Seinfeld. I don't know if it would cross the line into offensive or not. I want to say probably not, because the character is never presented in a unflattering light, but it's a very exaggerated performance. So I don't know about that one. Somebody who has more of a connection to somebody who's Jewish would have to tell me that. So I don't know. Actually, let me look it up. Chef character. Let me see if anybody. I didn't see anything about it. So my suspicion is that nobody really cares, or that it's not seen as. Because I was just like, wow, that is a very specific accent that this guy's doing. Like he's just busting out words that don't seem to have any connection to anything. Almost like there's an episode of Frasier where they're pretending to be Jewish because Frasier's girlfriend is Jewish, and his brother keeps using all these phrases and kind of sayings like oy vey and things like that he would never normally say, and that's the joke. So I don't know if it's something like that or not. Regardless, like I said, I didn't see any controversy erupt over it, so I assume it's okay. Outside of that, I think everybody else is doing straight performances. That's clearly supposed to be an exaggerated character. At least to me, it seems like it. But again, maybe I'm wrong. Everybody else, I think, is trying to play it straight. And I don't think it matters, because I don't think the story matters. I think it's just that you want to see people getting melted. And that there's tons of. And I think that's... the original is not exactly some kind of paragon of great filmmaking. It's the fact that there aren't a lot of movies that did what it did, and certainly not in the way that it did it. So I think that was the appeal, is because the original also used bright, over-the-top colors. Again, I think to almost try to sap any of the horror from it, because they probably understood at that point, too, that this seemed like an extraordinarily cruel movie to, what were... In the original, most of the homeless individuals who got melted were innocent people. They were not evil. There's one guy who was and this probably was not something that a lot of Vietnam vets received very well. He was clearly supposed to be a PTSD veteran who was having flashbacks, but if you think it was treating it with any delicacy or great empathy for actual veterans, then you've watched the wrong movie. So... outside of that, though, the rest of the characters weren't really doing anything terribly wrong, and they were getting killed in horrific ways. So I suspect that they did the bright colors to kind of offset that a bit. I don't know. Or maybe they just didn't have access to good blood mixes. That could be. So, I think some people were like, oh, this is not a worthy successor. And I'm like, worthy successor? Did you actually watch the first one? It's not held up as, a secret Goodfellas or anything. Come on. It's street trash, man. It's all in the name. And I say this as somebody who owns the Blu-ray of it that's 5 feet from me. I love the movie. But it's not, it ain't no secret classic. Come on. It's a melt movie. And there aren't a lot of those. And certainly they don't make many of them anymore. We've had a good run of them in recent years, though, because... Well, no, Body Melt's pretty old now, too. So there haven't been a lot of them lately. So as that, and if you like practical effects, because, again, there's some CG blood here and there. There's CG on the muzzle flashes. You could tell those are CG effects. I don't really care that much. There's not a lot of gunfire until the very end anyway. But all the stuff that people would really care about seems like it's probably 90%, if not more, practical. They may have used CG to erase maybe, some of the wires or whatever that set some of the stuff off, and maybe because there are some mannequins and dummies that are kind of twitching around. So some of those they may have digitally erased some things. There's a puppet. The one guy sees an imaginary puppet who is very into having sex with whatever is in front of him, I guess is the best way to put it. He's this little blue-looking weird guy that only the one guy can see until the other guy takes a drug that makes him into kind of a Superman, and then he sees him too. And, he's almost like a Yoda character, except very, very crass. Crass Yoda, I guess. Crota. And so there's puppet work. That's clearly practical. That's why I said, like I said, a lot of these directors will, it became a trend for a while to say, oh yeah, I really have a lot of respect for practical filmmaking. I'm going to, integrate as much as possible. And you find out that there's very actual little practical in it. Or, like in the Star Wars movies, okay, this one ship was practical and then everything around it is all completely made up CG stuff. Whereas in this, unless it's very convincing, and I don't get why you would do it, I would say that the majority of the melt effects are in fact practical. The severed penis looks like a prosthetic penis. So that's the reference to the first movie. They don't fling it around as much. So if you come in expecting that when you see that, you're going to be let down. Although that police officer does recover awfully quickly from having a major organ cut off, because then the rest of the movie he's pissed off and he wants to find the guy who did it to him. There's no indication, though, he had to go to the hospital for a while or anything. So, like I said.
Okay, so his penis is removed and then he goes on the revenge hunt.
Yes.
Okay.
Then he gets melted, and then you see what's left of his genitalia after he melts.
Oh,
so you basically see balls with a stump. So, like I said, this movie clearly has reverence for the original. It's not shying away from any of that material. And I think that if I'm being very objective about it, it supersedes the original in terms of how much melting there is, which is a strange metric that I don't get to apply to a lot of films. But it's the truth. There's way more melting in this movie than the first one, and you see a lot more variation in it. Because, like I said, there's people who peel their faces off. Then there's people who have these, big sacks of boils and pustules that get grotesquely large and explode. There's a head that gets hit off by a truck. There is one where the stomach explodes and all the entrails come out. There's stumps that come off, so people's arms and legs come off in different ways. Yeah, there's a lot of variety in how the bodies get dismembered as well. And as I've said a couple times, the thing that keeps it from being an Eli Roth film is the fact that everything is such a almost childlike, colorful. It almost looks like melted cotton candy. I think that's the best way to put it. Like something out of a Wonka factory, except that people are screaming and, their eyes are popping and it's flying out of them in spurts. But that does keep it from going over the line into being Cronenberg level body horror. Is this
supposed to be near future?
Well, it seems that way because
I'm looking at the trailer
drones.
Right now. So
yeah, that's about the only. Yeah, there's some indication it's supposed to be. I wouldn't say too far in the future, maybe a decade, maybe not even, because there's a lot of LED signs, more than you would think. And there are these floating drone things that I don't think there's any there's no current present version of them. But that's about it. Everything else I think is pretty much the same as it is now. I mean, you don't see any really like future cars or anything weird that way. The machine guns look like M16s.
Yeah, the trailer is very heavy on the plot.
Yeah.
And then you start to get a sense of the melty, yeah.
Yeah, and you're not going to... I barely even remember the plot. I only know that the one woman saw her family die or something.
Oh, yeah, I just saw that the guy get run over.
Yeah. See? Yeah. But what I like is I had this kind of... About the first 15 minutes of it or so, I was like, oh... This is going to be a lot of story and just a couple of melt scenes. That's what they're going to go for. And it's not that. They really, to the point where there are almost non sequitur melt scenes where they almost said, okay, it's been 10 minutes since somebody melted. We just have to melt somebody. Who cares why? And they just have somebody find a bottle of liquor, a person who has no connection to anything, and they drink it and they melt out in an alley where nobody can see them. And then the movie just keeps going. And I kind of respect that because they know what they're making. And I'd rather that than them not doing enough because they felt like they had to make sure they prioritized the narrative. Bullshit. It's fucking street trash. You don't need to prioritize narrative. You can have one. That's fine. It does make the in-between segments a little bit more organic, but barely. And honestly, Were there no story, no one would care. So it's $4 on Amazon. I thought it was a blast. It's just almost like similar to the S.T.A.L.K.E.R review. If you like the first one, you're going to find a lot to like here. If you thought the first one was a disgusting, tasteless, crass piece of filth that no normal human being would ever want to watch, this will not change your mind. It's for those freaks, and I'm one of them, so I had a great time with it. So I would say, especially for how cheap it is to rent, I would say watch it. Just don't get too caught up in the narrative, because you won't remember it 15 minutes after you finish the movie, and you won't care, because you'll have seen so much. I mean, the amount of money they had to spend on whatever that paint or whatever was, I imagine it was quite interesting to see the people walking off the set after a day of doing this stuff, because you'd have to be shower. I know how, if I'm just painting something like one color of paint, how hard that is to get off. The amount of different colored paints. And I know that fake blood, I've seen multiple interviews with people who work on movies who say it's one of the most miserable things to try to get off your body. I would guess this was a very messy film, and not just narratively, but also just to make it. But I think in the end it's worth it. I would say it's something that anybody who's a fan of this stuff, either of the original film or just melt films in general, because there aren't a million of them. It's not like there's a ton of slashers. Like, you can really start to get selective about slasher films because there were so many of them made. Melt films, I can think of
I've only ever seen the Blob.
And that wouldn't be considered a melt film. That's a monster film.
Really? Because that one scene with the kid coming out through the fucking...
Well, yeah, he's been digested, but he's not melting.
Like, see, that, and I'd say that RoboCop has a bit of melt in it.
Yeah, well, okay, yes, but that's not the main gimmick of the film.
No, it's not. It's not the main point of the movie.
Yeah, so movies I'm talking about would be like The Incredible Melting Man, which isn't particularly good, but it does have a guy who's melting throughout the film and ends up in a puddle at the end. Body Melt, Street Trash. I'm forgetting one. I know there's another one that I'm not remembering now. And then the modern one. I mean, that's 5. I can think of 5 that are... Actually, let's see. Hold on. I know I'm missing one. Melt films. What is considered one? And as I look that up...
200 hours later...
Okay, let's see. All right. Here's an extended list. Oh, boy. Okay. Well, the Blob is on there. So
it is a melt film.
Well, this person considers it one. I would say most people probably wouldn't, but fine, it's there. The Stuff. Yes, The Stuff has people that are melting because they eat the yogurt and then they melt. That's the one I was forgetting. Slime City. Yeah, I saw Slime City. Yeah, but that's about a monstrous guy. Okay, I guess it's just what you want to consider as a melt film. To me, there's not that many. Because to me, when I say a melt film, that is that the central conceit of the entire thing is people melting. That's the whole thing. As opposed to something like The Blob, where it's a monster movie where some people get melted, but they're really being digested. It's semantic, I'll admit. And that's fine. Yeah, okay, so here. Toxic Avenger isn't pure melt. See, pure melt. This person understands. But the main character's origin and skin transformation is very melty. So you have no choice but to gaze into his melted face the whole movie. Yeah. See, that's what I'm saying. Is for me, pure melt is a movie like Street Trash. Not a lot of them. Elements, But like I said, if you like melt movies or you like the original, you'll have a great time with this. Don't worry about the narrative. That's all. I don't think it overpowers the rest of the movie. There's so much melting of people that even a weak narrative cannot possibly derail your enjoyment. So I had a great time with it, especially for $4. Absolutely worth it for that. And that's it. That's all I got to review. So S.T.A.L.K.E.R 2 is watch some gameplay videos and make a decision there. Street Trash, you will know if you want to see this or not. And if you were even entertaining the idea, spend the $4. You're going to have a good time. And that's it. On that note, well, if you were in America, hope you had a nice Thanksgiving. I don't think anybody else anywhere does it in this particular week. So, yeah, that's it. All right. Have a great weekend, and we'll talk to you next week. Visit OzoneNightmare.com to subscribe to new episodes, browse through our back catalog, or to find links to support the show. Follow at Ozone Nightmare on Twitter for the latest episode postings and other show information. If 280 characters just isn't enough, you can always email us, theozonenightmare@gmail.com. The opening theme for the show is provided by Heartbeat Hero. The closing theme is provided by Ogre. Please visit and support these artists using the links in the show notes for each episode.